Well, whether you practice outside or work out in a gym or work out in your home basement, we all have something in common with professional athletes. We all sweat. And as the Marlies found out, there's a little bit more science to sweat than you might think.
My name is Dr. Lawrence Spreet, and I'm professor and chair in the Department of Human Health and Nutritional Sciences at the University of Guelph in Guelph, Ontario. Well, what we're trying to do today is we're trying to measure how much the players sweat when they practice, because if you lose more than about 2% of your body mass, studies have shown that your on-ice performance goes down. And the patch part of it is simply that we're trying to collect a little sample of the player's sweat. Because when you sweat, it's not just water, but you're also losing a lot of salt. So we're trying to get an idea on how salty the player's sweat is. Because the more salty it is, then the more salt you lose, and you might have to work harder to put some of that back in, either during the practice or after the practice. Well, it's interesting. It's science, but it's pretty simple science. And for most of us that engage in sports, we don't really ever have to worry about becoming slightly or mildly dehydrated. But studies have shown with stop-and-go sports like basketball and hockey that if you lose about 2% of your body mass, that your cognitive or your ability to make decision performance and also your athletic performance goes down. And it's not a dangerous level of dehydration in any, there's no worry about that, but we know that you want to make sure that you don't lose more than 2%. So if you weigh 90 kilograms, like a lot of these players do, that amounts to 1.8 kilograms or 1.8 liters of fluid. And a lot of the players will lose 2 liters of fluid in an hour and a half practice quite easily. Even though they don't play in hot climates per se, the micro environment underneath their equipment is extremely hot, and not surprisingly, they have very high sweat rates.
Dehydration is very common in hockey. We try to keep the guys hydrated as much as possible. We have all kinds of tricks with playing so many games and so few nights. We have some salts that we have them use, electrolyte drinks that we have them use, for like Gatorade, for example. Some of the effects of dehydration are cramping, muscle strains, and it's easier to get injuries when you're dehydrated. The key is for players to hydrate all the time. They hydrate in the morning, they hydrate in the afternoon, and they hydrate before the game. Because if you're drinking too much water before the game, then you won't be able to play, and it's going to be too late. We try to keep an eye on their weight, and we look at their weight before practice and after practice, and for every pound they lose, we usually ask them to drink 1 liter of water, so two 500 milliliter bottles. And supplement it with electrolytes. So if they're hydrating properly, then they'll come off the ice and they'll be the same weight. And if they're not hydrating properly, then we know from taking their weight all the time.
Not every exercise has to be the latest fad, and I know core strength is one of those things that certainly has been part of the vocabulary of exercise as of late. But as strength and conditioning coach Brian Marshall points out, sometimes you got to reach back to what works and what has worked, like the old medicine ball.
First and foremost, our priority is injury prevention, right? So we want to help supplement what they get from the medical staff and help them take care of their bodies and prepare for the next game. Yeah, the main benefit for us using medicine balls for their core training is that we can get the athlete to express their core strength in a more dynamic, functional type way. So there's a lot of rotation of the trunk in hockey, whether it be a slap shot, throwing a punch, or even sometimes bracing themselves for a check. So we want to train their cores in a more dynamic and functional way for hockey. So the medicine balls allow us to do that. With them we can do a variety of different throwing patterns that sort of mimic a lot of the movements that they usually have to do in a hockey game.